What are the 8 most scandalous words in the Bible? Stay tuned for our perspectives. Welcome to Perspectives, a podcast where the clergy women of the First United Methodist Church of San Diego share their musings on scripture, theology, and what it has to do with us. Welcome to this episode of Perspectives. I'm Reverend Trudy Robinson. I'm here with Reverend Dr. Hannah Kaw. We have some thoughts about the scandal we are seeing in the first chapter of the Gospel of John. We are continuing our exploration of this chapter with this theory or this series that we're calling the Unexpected Divine. And today we are looking at the unexpected divine in the spaces between, and the scripture is John chapter 1, verse 14. Just one, but it has those 8 words that get everybody tied up in a knot. If you challenge them. Yes. We might be challenging them.
Yes.
We'll see. John 1, verse 14. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Yeah, it's those first 8 words, I think, that has really caused an uproar over time.
Yes.
Right? Tell us a little bit about what you know. I know you know a lot about the original language this would have been offered in.
Yes.
What insights do you have?
So these are the 8 simple words. There are not any sophisticated words.
Right? Yes.
Simple words used, and John, this guy, knew the Hebrew scripture so well, so he began this gospel saying, in the beginning, paralleling in the beginning in Genesis.
Yep.
And now he's using this metaphor of tabernacle, the tent of tabernacle.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
where God dwelled among the Israelites.
Yeah.
And the Greek verb that's used in this verb implies setting up a tent.
Oh, really?
Yes. Lived among us, dwelled
Yeah,
among us.
Yeah.
That's the image that he was portraying.
Yeah.
God moved in with us. It's not a single day visit, not only on Sundays. God moved in to see the ugly and the real side of us.
God is living with us. Okay. Yeah.
So that was the most interesting thing to begin
That
this
is
text.
interesting. I never knew about that connection. I got through seminary somehow without learning any languages. So they looked at me and said, yeah, she can't do it. She can't speak English. So barely can do that.
I flunked it 3 times.
So I think part of the scandal of this, right, is God taking on flesh, God living among us.
Yes.
With us in the with the tent right there, right? I can remember when I was just starting seminary, Joan Osborne, for those of you who may remember, I don't know, saying, "What if God were one of us?" Do you remember that song?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. What if God were one of us? And I remember I was singing it, and I felt so rebellious. And it's interesting though, because that is our faith. That is a tenet of our Christian doctrine, that the God took on flesh. The Word dwelt among us. That is key to all of this. In human body. But it was scandalous for the people who were hearing this for the first time. And I think it's been scandalous ever since, depending on how much you want to think of Jesus as human, right? We in the Christian doctrine says Jesus is fully human and fully divine, but there are limits, I think, we have posed on whether or not Jesus really is human, right?
Yes.
Do you remember the Da Vinci Code?
Yes.
Yep, right. That little spoiler at the end. It's been a while since I've seen it, but
it's been a while.
They imply Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, and they had a child that he didn't really get killed, at least not until the child was born, right? And that child carries on the bloodline. That's an interesting thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right? How human are we going to let Jesus be?
In our tradition, in our history, we have divinized or like
Made a deity.
make make Jesus more divine than
Yeah.
he was fully human.
Yeah, for
So-
sure. Yeah.
John is inviting us. Can you see the
Yeah.
humanness in Jesus?
Yeah. That really is interesting because we have pushed it so quickly to, divine, fully,
Different.
right with God from the very beginning. But that other part of being human, there are definitely limits.
Yes. And so as a result, we ended up adoring and worshiping Jesus without
Yeah.
following.
Yeah. Well, it's hard if Jesus is so perfect. You know, I think I have said a time or two in this podcast, as we've talked about the Word becoming flesh, that, Jesus, who can do all of the things that are all divine, isn't much help for me,
No.
right? I mean, God bless him.
Yes.
Sounded weird. Sounded a little bit. It made my soul jump a little bit. What did you say that for? Anyway, but yeah, I think there is something really powerful about that idea that Jesus was human. And to explore that a little bit more, I'm going to have to quote another little bit of culture, if we can call a book by Christopher Moore culture. It's his book called The Lamb.
Oh.
And it's the gospel according to Biff, Jesus' childhood best friend. And it dreams up all sorts of these interesting shenanigans from the view of a very human young boy, Biff, right? But I know it made me uncomfortable when I first read it. That idea that Jesus really is fully human. So I connect, though, with Jesus and his humanity. In when he gets it wrong. We don't like to actually deal with those scriptures, but he gets it wrong sometimes.
Yes.
He gets it wrong. The Syrophoenician woman, we've talked about him, right? Or her. And when he turns over the table in anger, when he cries over his church, or he cries after his friend Lazarus died, right? I can relate to Jesus, who I get it wrong, I cry, I get angry, haven't flipped a table yet, but
We blame others, the
well,
religious leaders.
yeah, well,
As Jesus did.
right.
But that's human nature.
Yeah, but I think that's really helpful to see that in the Gospels rather than to gloss it over.
Yes.
Don't you think?
And throughout the entire Gospel of John, we see a lot of Jesus' humanness.
Yeah.
There's no divine.
Oh,
And
now it's interesting you say that because I see Jesus saying, I am, and I think, oh, that's the voice of God speaking right there. So I see that as divinity. But tell me more about what you're thinking.
But even if I am claim is there, he's claiming that as a human. And you see a lot of human everyday life
Yeah.
throughout the gospel
That's true.
and interactions with people and encounters with people. So he's operating in this world.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's what I meant.
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense.
There are divine sparks being glimpsed in his humanness.
Yeah, that makes sense. He could have written the gospel very differently if he really wanted to emphasize the divinity. So it seems like he's got something more going on here.
Must
Yeah.
have been written before the doctrines came.
Yeah. Are there any ways you can't see Jesus as human?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really for me.
Have you always been like that? I mean, is that something you learned from your faith?
Well, I grew up in a tradition where Jesus was considered to be more divine than human.
Yeah.
But as I walked along my faith journey, I
Yeah.
began to see the humanness
Yeah.
and how scandalous John 1:14 became for me.
Yeah, yeah.
That it's before this time, before in any of our religious backgrounds, we go to church, we go to worship God, and in the Jewish communities, they went to offer the sacrifices.
Yeah.
But here in this gospel, God came to us. It was a different direction of movement.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was along with my theological expansion and deepening and all that that helped me finally see why John 1:14 is so scandalous
Yeah.
in our own understanding of the divine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tend to want to make Jesus more divine when he is facing the cross.
That aspect, yes.
Because I don't know that I could do it. If he were human and doing
Yes.
that, it's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
right? He is being courageous in the face of so much threat, and I don't know that I could ever do that.
I wondered, now that you mentioned a specific case, I wondered if Jesus lived with the human nature and the divine call in him, in his own skin and flesh. And he had those moments where he had to do a long prayer in the Gospel of John 15. And within him, the divine call and divine nature and the humanness always struggled.
Yeah.
And that's why he cried and teared and he screamed on the cross, and that's why he
Yeah.
prayed.
Yeah.
And if I were in Jesus' shoes, I would have
Yeah.
stopped right before being crucified.
Yeah.
But his divine nature is
Yeah.
the one that
Yeah.
actually pushed him one step further than ordinary humans.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You do see Jesus struggle when it comes to the cross, the prayer, the "Why have you forsaken me?" I mean, all of that. So that's a good way to explain that. You ready to move on a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
Lead me.
Yeah. So that's the Word made flesh, lived among us, and the scripture then goes on. We have seen His glory.
Oh.
We have seen His glory. About the only thing I think of is the Crystal Cathedral, the glory of Easter. I saw when I was a teenager, I think. It was glorious. I can't imagine it was the way it happened. But what do you see when you see and they have seen His glory?
So here we hear, I'm sorry for being nerd, we hear the first person plural. We have seen.
Yeah, yeah.
In past tense, we have seen His glory. So I imagine a community seeing this divine lived among them. So it's not just a prologue. It's more of their communal confession.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I see in these verses.
As you name that, I imagine, this is not very soon after Jesus was crucified and resurrected. It was a long time before John wrote the gospel. And so I picture this community of faith not reliant upon the resurrection appearances, but reliant upon other things. Maybe the shared stories that taught them about Jesus. Maybe the powerful reversals of the parables he told.
Yes.
Maybe it was the characters in the Gospel of John, if you will, that it represented this is how a disciple should live. And in those things, they see the glory of God.
Yes, in their communal witnesses.
Yeah.
And it's not just witnesses, it's a community shaped by that flesh, the word becoming flesh.
Yeah.
Lived among us, even if that flesh is long gone.
Yeah. I can't help but think of that witness of seeing Jesus as human, but knowing there's something divine there too. I'm not sure they had the language to understand that. I have no doubt that combination allowed them to face the persecution that they would face as early followers. It wasn't a doctrinal statement then. It was a way of life. It was taking the divine that they saw made flesh in Jesus and being able to live their everyday life with, even if it meant persecution.
Yes. And now that I was listening to your unpacking of the story, I wondered if these ancient people, have they ever saw any humans living like a divine person? So before then, the divine was always invisible, untouchable, transcendent, far away, distanced. And still you fear that divine and worship.
Yeah.
But now the divine entered into this world and became the glory that they can resonate with.
Yeah.
And I see more scandal here, right?
Yeah.
A fellow who lived next door.
That's right.
I heard it from my great-grandfather and grandfather and grandmother and my mother and neighbors.
Yeah. And we have seen the glory of God in something so counter to what they expected. Yeah.
And it's not a recollection of their memory. It's more about this is how we are going to live.
Yeah. Wow. They were going to make the word then become flesh within their lives.
Yes.
Within their everydayness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's becoming more scandalous as we unveil.
Yeah, it is. So I this passage made me think of panentheism, which is the belief that God is both within the world and beyond the world, within creation and beyond creation, immanent and transcendent, right? And that's, I think, what this is saying, this divine nature of this human, right? And panentheism sees it in other places, not just one particular person, right? And I do think that's in our scripture too. I absolutely do.
Yes, I hear your word clearly, loud and clear. So that's when I started shifting my understanding of God slightly in my theological journey.
Okay.
So did I tell you about I was about to leave the church and not believe in God when in my 30s?
Wow.
I walked away from the church.
Wow.
Because the theology I was learning was not compatible with what we practice as Christians. So I almost left the church, still continued to read books on process philosophy and theology, and came across the distinction between pantheism and panentheism. And if that's the theology we believe, I can be a Christian.
There you go.
And
Look
follow
at that.
the incarnation.
Yeah.
And the easiest way for me to grasp the concept of panentheism was that God is in everything.
Yeah.
and everything and everyone, everything on earth is in God, is it dwelling in God's presence.
So dwelling in God's presence and reflecting something inside of God.
The divine sparks.
Yeah, I think so too. It's funny you should say that in the context of thinking Christianity can't hold you, right? I went down the rabbit hole in my preparation for our recording today and found an article where clearly panentheism, from this Christian's perspective, was absolutely not the way to think of God. And I was really kind of shocked by that. And I was reading some of the article, and he had essentially made a straw man, a complete misunderstanding of what God really is. And just watching some of his language as he's talking about it, it was really kind of interesting. He says that pantheism, a view of God, could be summarized as all is one or all is God, which is not pantheon. That's just everything's immanent. And humankind has the same fundamental essence as the rest of the creative order, and he begins to talk about the way in which he wants humanity to be like in the creation story, placed above with dominion over all of creation and of a different kind of being as that. And it's funny because in the article, he shifts from humankind to mankind. I'm kind of thinking that might not have been a mistake, in 1925, still doing that, right? Okay. But he's making a point. Mankind here is divine, but no more divine than the rest of the material world. And then he begins to say, in fact, we've talked about Mother Earth, and we talk about the environmental destruction as raping the earth, and mankind and wildlife are brothers and sisters and all part of the same circle of life. And that was all bad, according to his understanding. And, as soon as he claimed the circle of life, I'm an Elton John fan, so of course I'm like, oh, he's wrong. I know he's wrong. But I just find it really interesting that, kind of like the things I mentioned earlier, the Gospel according to Biff and Joan Osborne, the rancor that came up from this idea of panentheism, that this man thought he had to create a straw man to knock down and burn, and saying that there's a confusion between the creator and the creation. There's the same, and it just doesn't understand what panentheism is, right? All of that is to say, it makes it really hard to be able to engage in dialogue with folks who have the more traditional Christian understanding when we can't even agree on the terms of things. And what I'm wondering is, what is he protecting? What does he think he's going to lose if we understand God as being present everywhere and beyond? And the flip side of that is, what does he have to gain if he opened himself up a little bit to that idea? For me, I don't know. I can be snarky and mean and say, he loses being right if he thinks of this other understanding. But I think more importantly, there's so much you can gain. God is still God.
Yes.
Jesus is still Jesus, because none of us have kind of figured out how to really live more divinely than humanly.
Yes.
There is still this greatness about what the faith in Christianity has to offer. but it's a little openness for how we encounter God, how we experience the divine, how we see the glory, right?
Yes.
Why do we have to limit it? In fact, I can't even see any glory in anything he had said, right?
Yeah, yes. I think
know.
he had a bad interpretation of panentheism and what it means for us. The beauty of panentheism for me personally is that everything has the beauty, the goodness, hesed of God, the grace and truth of God in them. That doesn't mean that we are full of glory, we are full of grace and truth.
Yeah.
But we have a little glimpses of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so are you, and so is everyone here and everywhere.
Yeah. And so does the man who is clinging to this understanding.
Yes.
Right?
And the beauty of panentheism, sorry, we don't want to go back to that route too much, but the beauty of that kind of understanding actually leaves room for mysteries of the divine and abundant grace more than the humans can possibly fathom or imitate. There's abundant grace that's beyond our own understanding and imagination. And there's a possibility of the divine coming into our world in a mysterious ways. And that's when I gave up on thinking, I'm not know-it-all. I cannot possibly know every nature of God. So I will just dwell in God as one of the many. And seeing others in that relationship.
You said something. If it's okay that we close up, you said this, and I think it's a beautiful takeaway. This passage helps us find divine goodness in our brokenness, especially as we see ourselves as part of the whole, both nature and community.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Divine goodness in our brokenness. That's beautiful.
Did I say that?
And
no, you interpreted it. Divine goodness.
I'm pretty sure you said it.
Okay, all right.
I may have said, especially as we see ourselves as part of the whole. And if we're really going to take this seriously, then I've got to figure out a way to recognize this man who made me so mad about what he was saying about panentheism as my brother.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way of taking John 1:14 away with us.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more about other people's takeaway from this.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other things to say before I pose questions?
Oh, I always have something to say. But no, I think I'll save it for a sermon on Sunday.
Okay, good. Fair enough. We would love to hear more about how you take away John 1:14, but we would like to give you some questions to ponder upon. And please feel free to share your feedbacks and thoughts and your process of faith journey. So, how does the idea that Jesus lived a life just like us humans change the way you think about Jesus? How does this understanding impact your everydayness? With whom have you felt the Spirit of God? And I hope you enjoyed these questions and hope you have some conversations with your fellow Christians. And thanks for listening in and thanks for joining us. And see you next week.
See you next time. This is a production of First United Methodist Church of San Diego. To learn more about our events and ministries and to access additional learning resources, visit FUMCSD.org.